Last time I told you guys that in this episode I would decorate Denmark into an awesome zoo, but I realized that to do that I kind of need to be rich first. Let me explain. For me to make this a truly awesome build, I want to use lots of different blocks and items, but currently I don't really have access to any of those. So instead we're putting this project on hold and starting a journey towards getting absolutely rich. Therefore, I'm gonna be building a raid farm. So firstly, I went out to Denmark because that's where I'd been seeing the villagers spawning, and I took off in a direction towards uncharted chunks in hopes of finding a pillager outpost. And just a few hundred blocks later, I spotted what I'd been looking for, a pillager outpost, and it even came with some allays. Excited, I landed on the top of the outpost just to realize that this was probably a really bad idea since I immediately got greeted by a horde of pillagers. So for now, I just flew over to a nearby village to set up a nether portal for an easy way to travel back and forth, which is when I realized I had been an idiot and not brought any materials to make a nether portal. But now that I had the coordinates, I might as well just fly back home and make the portal from the nether side. And boy, am I glad I did this, because on the way back home, I found yet another outpost, and this one was way closer to everything, so I wrote down the new coordinates for this one, and when I came home, I went straight to the nether and built a portal at the corresponding coordinates. Then I popped through to the overworld and just made this little temporary platform where I prepared myself to figure out how to tackle this project. Currently, it was looking like it was gonna be impossible to build anything without getting absolutely murdered by all the pillagers. And sitting in this water stream trying to snipe them wasn't really helping, because every time I got rid of one pillager, another would just spawn. So I had to find a way to prevent the pillagers from spawning. Introducing the mob switch. If you aren't familiar with the concept of a mob switch, it is basically a way of turning a world on peaceful mode without actually changing the difficulty.
Nice.
All you need is 70 villagers that you have to trade with, then you turn them all into zombie villagers so they can count towards the mob cap, and off you go. And now, for the mob switch to work, just keep them within the spawn chunks and they will always be loaded. And if you want to be able to turn off your mob switch, just make a smart little contraption that can move them outside of the spawn chunks with a flick of a few levers. And now I was ready to tackle the outpost. I needed an easy way to get the bad omen effect, and my idea was to build an arena at the bottom of the world with some hot air balloons in the sky where I could stand and snipe the captains from, giving me the bad omen effect in a fun but slightly more challenging way. To make my life a little bit easier, I had decided to use Lightmatica while building and turn on easy place mode, then simply get to placing down all the blocks for the arena. I wanted to stick to a similar ruined look as my main island, and for now, this is what we got. Now it was time to decorate this arena with some hot air balloons. And even though I might not be rich yet, I still want the hot air balloons to look good. So now came the daunting task of collecting a few thousand colored blocks for the hot air balloons. First, I had to breed a whole lot of sheep to get a ton of different colored wool. And while I do that, make sure you subscribe if you aren't already, and like the video to let me know you are enjoying the Skyblock series. Anyways, while I was dealing with the sheep, a few pesky pillagers decided to stop by. So sorry you guys, but I don't need you just yet. And about an hour later, I had enough wool to get started, and it was time to go back to the main island and prepare the other materials. Remember how I just told you a few pillagers had shown up while I was shearing the sheep? Well, after that hour, I didn't, and when I returned to my island, something peculiar started appearing at the top of my screen. Because I had accidentally started a raid on my main island, which I was not at all prepared for. So after making sure my villagers were safe, I ran around like a confused madman trying to deal with all the Vexes and the Ravengers. And in the end, I managed to not die and even got a decent amount of loot, as well as my first totem of undying.
Nice.
Anyways, next up on my material list was concrete powder. And I don't have any of that yet, and I also don't have enough sand to make a lot of concrete powder. Introducing the gravity block duplicator. That was a mouthful. Anyways, all you need to do is throw some Eyes of Ender in a random direction to quickly locate a stronghold, which in a void world is super easy because they float in midair. Find the portal room, fill it with all the eyes, and proceed to destroy the portal frame to make space for some redstone bits and bobs. Don't forget your chunk loader, and now we're ready to dupe an obscene amount of sand. Now, before you go yelling at me in the comments that this machine is basically cheating, remember that without one of these, the only way for me to get sand would be trading with the wandering trader, and to get enough sand that way, it would probably take me literal years. Then I hopped through the portal, and in the end, I made some temporary storage space, and I quickly duped the concrete I needed. And after sifting through all my unorganized shulkers, I had everything I needed to build the balloons. I had come up with this design for the balloons in a creative world, and then just followed a schematic layer for layer while building. In total, I made 3 balloons, although 2 of them I probably won't be using, since only one of them have a nether portal. I had made a few slow falling potions, which made it 10 times easier for me to place all the details on the outside of the balloons. And now the build was done. So I turned off the mob switch, and it was time to test out my skills with a bow and arrow, but something wasn't quite right with my arena because nothing seemed to be spawning. Now it turned out that the mob switch I had built was working really well. A little too well actually, because I had accidentally built it in the wrong spot. And now I could never turn it off. And instead of just moving it one chunk over, which was all I would need, I thought it would be a wonderful idea to move it out to my sand duper, because then I could just use the chunk loader as an on and off switch. And I mean, it would only require me to move 75 zombified villagers through the nether. Sometimes I ask why I do these things to myself. Now, if you thought it was annoying to deal with regular villagers, try dealing with zombified ones. On the way there, a bunch of them picked up items, which makes them useless because then they don't count towards the mob cap, and then I cured them back into villagers to get them to drop their items, which turned out to be for nothing because even after you turn them back into zombies, they still don't count for some reason. So then I had to make a new villager breeder and make even more zombie villagers, and oh my, after 4 hours of literal pain, my mob switch was finally done. Now I could finally test the arena, and it worked perfectly as intended. Well, mostly. And with today's creative build out of the way, it was now time to get started on the actual raid farm. I had researched a lot of raid farms to figure out which one would even be feasible to build in Skyblock, and I ended up going with a design by Chapman. Link to that one in the description. And with some more rummaging in my storage system and a trip to the nether fortress to get some wither skulls, I had soon packed everything I would need into some shulker boxes. I want the farm to be somewhere close by the arena, but I'm not sure how close they can be without interfering with each other. I guess we can try here. I mean, I can still see the balloons from here, so maybe we have to go a little bit further. Okay, that's the portal I just made all the way over there. So we're definitely far enough away now. So I think this is just gonna be good enough. And so I loaded up a schematic and got to building the farm. And this part of making the farm turned out to be really easy since the farm actually isn't very big or complex. Now all we were missing was to move in some villagers, which was not a big deal at all. Just kidding, it was a pain as usual. I had decided the easiest thing would be to bring over 2 villagers through the nether and then just breed the rest of the villagers I would need there. Then to try and keep my sanity intact, I carted them into their holding cells using minecarts, which turned out to not be as smooth and easy as I'd hoped, but it worked. And I even had a few casualties along the way. Well, some of it was my fault because I put in villagers with the wrong profession, but I fixed that pretty quickly. And finally, I was ready to use the farm, or so I thought. because nothing really seemed to be spawning, and for the life of me, I could not figure out why. I tried blowing up the nearby village, that didn't fix it. I looked through a bunch of my footage and just could not figure out what was wrong. So I gave up and just went to bed for that evening, and the next morning when I woke up, I realized what might be wrong, and it was so stupid. I hopped into Minecraft, pressed F3, and there it was. I had somehow completely forgotten to chunk align the farm when I built it. I would have to tear the entire farm down and rebuild it just a few blocks to the right once again, which I then did. There you go. Please just go in. Do not walk off the edge. Welcome to your new forever home. I finished up moving the rest of the villagers and completed the farm by moving the lower part as well. Then came the moment of truth where I had to test it out one last time. This farm better work now. It works. Thank goodness, this was such a pain. And with that said, that was all I had for you today, and I'll see you in the next video.